This misunderstanding is born of ignorance, an ignorance that runs the length and breadth of the vegetarian myth through the nature of agriculture and ending in the nature of life. The truth is also that life isn't possible without death, that no matter what you eat, someone has to die to feed you. And damn, is that not powerful? There she says it, in the narrative of my life. The first bite of meat after my 20-year hiatus marks the end of my youth, the moment when I assumed the responsibilities of adulthood. She realized she was being very ignorant and delusional by sticking to a belief system and not looking at the information for herself. We need to understand where our food is coming from. I believe it is our generation's responsibility to fix these fucked up and corrupt systems that are out there in the world that are ingrained and convoluted and just stuck in our day-to-day lives. We can't help but participate in these systems because we vote with them every single day. So, if we want to be this generation that changes the world, that actually fixes things, we need to start voting. We need to start acting differently. It might be a little more expensive to get food locally sourced, but that's the price we have to pay to be the change in this world.
Hold up. I am the Hungarian experiment.
What is going on, world? I am the Hungarian experiment. In today's video, we're going to talk about a 20-year vegan who has now turned back to eating meat. Yeah, imagine after 20 years of thinking that what you're doing is healthy for yourself, is good for the world, good for the planet, and doing less harm to animals, but after carrying it out for 20 years, deciding that it's better to go back. It's better to change your ways and to change something up. Right now, if you guys are following along, I'm doing the carnivore diet as an experiment on myself to see what it's like, to test it out, experiment on my body. And a lot of you guys have actually reached out to me over the last year or two saying, Peter, Hungarian experiment, you need to do this experiment. So I'm conducting it on myself right now. And it's actually fascinating the opinions, ideas, and perspectives that are coming in from vegans right now. And right now, if you guys are following along, you see from my live streams and some of my videos there, I'm actually reading The Vegetarian Myth by Lierre Keith. And Lierre Keith was a 20-year vegan before she decided to change her ways. And she has some powerful things to say in this book. She touches on a lot of the science. She also touches on a lot of the morals and ethics and even the politics behind veganism and vegans. So I think this is a very important book. I think the things she has to say is very powerful. And if you guys saw the hook at the beginning of this video, you will see that she has some very, very powerful words. And I think it's very important. If I ever was in charge of making sure this is how people got educated in some way, or there were some specific reads that people had to read, I believe this should be a read that everyone has to read at least once in their life. Whether you're plant-based, whether you're eating an animal-based diet, or you're eating a balanced diet between the both. I think this is a very important book. And today, I want to touch on some of the subjects that she mentions here within the first chapter, because again, I think this is very important for people to read. If you guys are going to click away, I really suggest you don't, because there's some powerful stuff in here, and I think this is stuff that you need to see. This is stuff that you need to hear. So let's get into some of her book here and some of the powerful messages that she has for people who are doing a vegan diet for justice. So let's dive into it. Chapter 1, why this book? This was not an easy book to write. For many of you, it won't be an easy book to read. I know. I was a vegan for almost 20 years. I know the reasons that compelled me to embrace an extreme diet, and they are honorable, ennobling even. Reasons like justice, compassion, a desperate and all-encompassing longing to set the world right, to save the planet, the last trees bearing witness to the ages, the scraps of wilderness still nurturing fading species, silent in their fur and feathers, to protect the vulnerable and the voiceless, to feed the hungry, at the very least to refrain from participating in the horror of factory farming. These political passions are born of a hunger so deep that it touches on the spiritual. Or they were for me, and they still are. I want my life to be a battle cry, a war zone, an arrow pointed and loosened into the heart of domination. Patriarchy, imperialism, industrialization, every system of power and sadism. If the martial imagery alienates you, I can rephrase it. I want my life, my body, to be a place where the earth is cherished, not devoured. Where the sadist is granted no quarter. Where the violence stops. And I want eating the first nutrients to be an act that sustains instead of kills. This book is written to further those passions, that hunger. It is not an attempt to mock the concept of animal rights or to sneer at the people who want a gentler world. Instead, this book is an effort to honor our deepest longings for a just world. And those longings for compassion, for sustainability, for an equitable distribution of resources are not served by the philosophy or practice of vegetarianism. We have been led astray. The vegetarian Pied Pipers have the best of intentions. I'll state right now what I'll be repeating later. Everything they say about factory farming is true. It is cruel, wasteful, and destructive. Nothing in this book is meant to excuse or promote the practices of industrial food production on any level. But the first mistake is in assuming that factory farming, a practice that is barely 50 years old, is the only way to raise animals. Their calculations on energy used, calories consumed, humans unfed are all based on the notions that animals eat grain. You can feed grain to animals, but it is not the diet for which they were designed. Grain didn't exist until humans domesticated annual grasses at most 12,000 years ago, while aurochs, the wild progenitors of the domestic cow, were around for 2 million years before that. For most of human history, browsers and grazers haven't been in competition with humans. They ate what we couldn't eat, cellulose, and turned it into what we could, protein and fat. Grain will dramatically increase the growth rate of beef cattle. There's a reason for the expression corn-fed, and the milk production of dairy cows. It will also kill them. The delicate bacterial balance of a cow's rumen will go acid and turn septic. Chickens get fatty liver disease if fed grain exclusively, and they don't need any grain to survive. Sheep and goats, also ruminants, should really never touch the stuff. This misunderstanding is born of ignorance, an ignorance that runs the length and breadth of the vegetarian myth through the nature of agriculture and ending in the nature of life. We are urban industrialists, and we don't know the origins of our food. This includes vegetarians despite their claims to the truth. It included me for 20 years. Anyone who ate meat was in denial. Only I had faced the facts. Certainly, most people who consume factory farm meat have never asked what died and how it died, but frankly, neither have most vegetarians. The truth is that agriculture is the most destructive thing humans have done to the planet, and more of the same won't save us. The truth is that agriculture requires the wholesale destruction of entire ecosystems. The truth is also that life isn't possible without death, that no matter what you eat, someone has died to feed you. And that's what I think is powerful here by Lierre Keith. We're going to touch on a little bit more, but I want to stop here because a bunch of this book, what she gets into, and what I think a lot of vegans and vegetarians are ignorant or delusional about, is what she says there, and it's so powerful. The truth is also that life isn't possible without death. That no matter what you eat, someone has to die to feed you. Whether you're eating a plant-based diet, or whether you're eating an animal-based diet or a balanced diet between the two, you are taking from this cycle of life, which is the cycle of death, and we are 100% part of that. Now, I believe when you want to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm only going to eat this form of life, you are saying you're above that cycle of life and death, that you're superior to it. And especially if you don't understand where your food is coming from. So when I have militant vegans, when I have people sharing their opinions and perspectives that what I'm doing is wrong, when I believe from the rhetoric that they're sharing with me that they're rather ignorant or delusional to the facts that are in this book, and to what a lot of people are spouting in the world, not just this book and not just Lierre Keith, but I believe it makes it just not as ethical, not more moral than eating meat. So I think that's super powerful, and thank you, Lierre Keith, for saying that. The truth is also that life isn't possible without death, that no matter what you eat, someone has to die to feed you. And that's what we need to learn to understand, and understand where our food is coming from. As she dives deeper into this book, and what I believe before I even started reading this book, is we need to be eating as locally as possible. We need to understand where our food is coming from. I believe it is our generation's responsibility to fix these fucked up and corrupt systems that are out there in the world that are ingrained and convoluted and just stuck in our day-to-day lives. We can't help but participate in these systems because we vote with them every single day. Our political system's fucked. Our food system's fucked. Our education system's fucked. Our scientific system is fucked. Everything is convoluted and lost, yet we still participate and vote with these every single day. When you have a plate of food, you don't understand where that food is coming from, you're voting with your dollar, that you agree to those systems that brought it to your plate. So, if we want to be this generation that changes the world, that actually fixes things, we need to start voting. We need to start acting differently. It might be a little more expensive to get food locally sourced, but that's the price we have to pay to be the change in this world. So let's get back into some of what Lierre Keith is saying, because it's about to get a lot more powerful here. The reality is that agriculture has created a net loss for human rights and culture. Slavery, imperialism, militarism, class divisions, chronic hunger and disease. Agriculture has also been devastating to the other creatures with whom we share the earth, and ultimately to the life support systems of the planet itself. What is at stake is everything. If we want a sustainable world, we have to be willing to examine the power relations behind the foundational myth of our culture. Anything less and we will fail. Questioning at that level is difficult for most people. In this case, the emotional struggle inherent in resisting any hegemony is compounding by our dependence on civilization and our individual helplessness to stop it. Most of us would have no chance of survival if the industrial infrastructure collapsed tomorrow. And our consciousness is equally impeded by our powerlessness. In the end, all the fortitude in the world will be useless without enough information to chart a sustainable forward course, both personally and politically. One of my aims in writing this book is to provide that information. The vast majority of people in the US don't grow food, let alone hunt and gather it. We have no way to judge how much death is embodied in a serving of salad, a bowl of fruit, a plate of beef. We live in urban environments, in the last whisper of forests, thousands of miles removed from the devastated rivers, prairies, wetlands, and the millions of creatures who died for our dinners. We don't even know what questions to ask to find out. And this is where I think it gets very powerful. In his book, Long Life, Honey in the Heart, Martin Prechtel writes of the Mayan people and their concept of Kas Lama, which translates roughly as mutual indebtedness, mutual insparkedness. The knowledge that every animal, plant, person, wind, and season is indebted to the fruit of everything else is an adult knowledge. To get out of debt means you don't want to be part of life. And you don't want to grow into an adult, one of the elders explained to Prechtel. The only way out of the vegetarian myth is through the pursuit of cosmolol, of adult knowledge. This is a concept we need, especially those of us who are impassioned by injustice. I know I needed it. In the narrative of my life, the first bite of meat after my 20-year hiatus marks the end of my youth, the moment when I assumed the responsibilities of adulthood. It was the moment I stopped fighting the basic algebra of embodiment. For someone to live, someone else has to die. In that acceptance, with all its suffering and sorrow, is the ability to choose a different way, a better way. And damn, is that not powerful? There she says it. In the narrative of my life, the first bite of meat after my 20-year hiatus marks the end of my youth, the moment when I assumed the responsibilities of adulthood. She realized she was being very ignorant and delusional by sticking to a belief system and not looking at the information for herself. And throughout the rest of this book, again, I'm only halfway through it right now, but it's powerful so far. And what she gets into is that she wanted to be as ethical as possible. She tried to eat as healthy as possible. She tried growing her own vegetable garden to sustain herself. And in the process of that, she learned so much because she was actually sourcing the food for herself and she knew the whole process. She understood that she needed manure from animals. She needed nitrogen from animal bones to help grow her vegetables. She understood that, holy crap, these insects, these pests are eating the food that I need to sustain myself. So she either had to chemically spray them or remove them physically herself, which after many years of being a vegan, she couldn't really do because she was in such a bad place because she really fucked up her body. But even if she was perfectly fine and healthy, having to do that every day, there's not enough time, and she realized it. So what did she do? She realized she has to get chickens to eat those insects. And it's a big cycle. And she started to realize over time that she was reliant on animals. She needed animals. And as far as she tried to delude herself in the beginning by, only getting the manure and not participating in farming herself with actual animals, that she was very ignorant and being delusional about the whole aspect. And that's just the beginning of the book. She then gets into all the morals, the ethics, the politics behind it. How we have 3 to 6 major corporations in the world who dominate and own all the grain in the world. And they've put farmers, they put the price of grain so low that farmers have to make a surplus of this stuff. And over the last 10,000 years, this is the big problem in the world. And this agriculture is actually what started to de-evolve us. I'm not going to dive too deep into this concept right now because I'm going to cover it in another video discussing when we started eating meat. And I'm actually going to touch on another book as well too, The Carnivore Code, featuring Dr. Paul Saladino. And still from this book, The Vegetarian Myth. And we dive in to discuss how we evolved as human beings. And we started out as apes living up in the trees, tree dwellers. And yes, we were eating fruit and we were eating vegetation. But the second we stood up and we got onto the ground, they can see through archaeological findings and through anthropology that we started then eating grasses. But not grass ourselves, or else we would not be able to get enough sustenance from it because we don't have a fermentive bacteria in our body to digest that cellulose. And what actually happened is that they found out that we were eating ruminant type animals. We were eating animals that fed on grass. And that was about 4 million years ago. And it wasn't about 2 million years ago that we started being able to make stone tools for hunting. And it wasn't only about 1 million years ago that we were able to start using fire. And over that course, as you can see from the photos popping up on the screen here, over that 4 to 1 million mark is when our brains started drastically growing. What people believe is that when we started coming out of the trees, we were still scavengers. We were scavenging the food left over by carnivores. But carnivores, predator type animals, can't get into the skulls and eat the brains. So we were using our opposable thumbs to pick up stones and smash the brains open. And the brains of animals are full of nutrients, full of fats. And this is what helps start progressing our brain growth. And from the other pictures as you're seeing here, our digestive system from being these tree dwellers started to change because we started having a different food source. And this is what we've been doing for the last 3 to 4 million years. And it's only been the last 10,000 years that we actually invented agriculture. And we started to harvest grains and started implementing agriculture and grains into our diets. And now we're starting to feed it to the animals. And this is why we have so many negative issues in the world. Why we have insulin resistance, diabetes, atherosclerosis, all these negative things that are going on in the world is due to sugar. Now again, the whole aspect and the whole reason that we are omnivores and we can eat both plants and animals and meat is because going back 4 million years before that, that's what we were doing. But over the last 4 million years, we've been mainly an animal and meat-based diet. And that's what Lierre Keith dives deep into in this book. So, if you're someone who is very persistent on the vegan diet, I challenge you to read this book. And if you truly believe that what you're doing is best for yourself, you should be able to handle the information in this book and still be able to stick to what you believe is the best for yourself. But I truly believe and I truly challenge you to pick up this book and read it, because I think it's going to break down a lot of the propagated things that you believe and you understand. And when you start learning where your food's actually coming from, you start voting with your dollar, you're a lot more aware that when you just run off to the grocery store and you buy some stuff, that it's actually still contributing to animal harm, animal murder. It's still contributing to the the topsoil getting eroded away. It's destroying our waterways because we have to irrigate those to support all this mass monocropping for agriculture. I think you may change your mind. If not, reach out to me after you read this book, and I'd love to hear it. But once again, there are some powerful words said by Lierre Keith here in this book. And as I mentioned, I believe everybody should read this book. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, I challenge you to read this book if you are very persistent against having a meat-based diet. Because what I truly believe is we need to be eating as local as possible. We need to be getting all our food sourced locally. We need to know where it's coming from. Since I began this carnivore diet 37 days ago now, 95% of the foods that I put in my body have come from within an hour here of London, Ontario, from Tillsonburg. I went and visited the ranch a couple years back. I got to see the animals. They're not locked up in cages. They're supporting the ground. They're supporting the cycle of life and the cycle of death that we are truly a part of. When you decide to step back from it, you decide not to participate in it, you decide that you're not going to be aware of where your food's coming from, you're saying you agree with these big agricultural systems, and you're voting with it every single day. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'd love to know what you guys think. Go throw your comment in the comment section below. And again, I challenge you to read this book. And once again, thank you, Lierre Keith, for writing this. Thank you for saying these powerful words. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am the Hungarian Experiment.
I am the Hungarian Experiment.